minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
60 minutes? Are you sure? You really want me up here? Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And it's actually bittersweet because we're here to honor a friend, a longtime friend to many, even to some sitting here in this institution, because Vicki Dixon was an institution here in Washington, D.C., not in a bad way, but in a way where she touched so many lives in such a positive manner. I'm going to go ahead and save my comments about Vicki until later because we've got some friends that got to know Vicki over the years like I did and got to not only become friends, but just to see the wholesome, genuine, kind individual that Victoria Sands Dixon was. Her career was encapsulated by helping so many people here in Congress get things done. And her passing is bittersweet to all of us. But one good friend of Vicki and a very good friend of mine is the ranking member on the Committee on Veterans Affairs. So, Mr. Bost, I'll yield to you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my good friend Rodney Davis for yielding time to me and for organizing this special order. Tonight, you're going to hear several words from our colleagues that will echo the same resounding words, and that's Vicki Dixon should be recognized for all that she did in her life. But most of all, she was kind. She was a friend. When the delegation got together, she was always there to welcome newcomers to D.C. that she may have known from the time in Illinois. You know, she dedicated her life serving our country, which she loved deeply. In her 30-plus years here in Washington, D.C., she worked for several members of Congress as well as 7 cabinet secretaries. Vicki will be deeply missed by those of us who knew her, whether in Illinois, Washington, Florida, where she just retired to in the fall. You know, she left our capital community and our nation better off than it was before. She was loved. She will be missed tremendously. Whether, when the Illinois delegation got together over at the club, it was always amazing how quick she would come up to greet everyone, show the friendship and kindness, give you some advice now and again on how to deal with this place as crazy as it is at times. Both Tracy and I send our prayers to her mother, Peggy, her sister, Christy, and all of her many nieces and nephews. And we want to say a special thank you for how she's touched each one of our lives. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you to my good friend, Mr. Bost, for those heartfelt words. Now I'd like to recognize another good friend of Vicki, our good friend, Mr. LaHood.
Well, thank you, Congressman Davis, and I echo the comments of both Congressman Bost and Congressman Davis. It is bittersweet to be here tonight to honor the life of Vicki Dixon, who was a friend to many in Illinois, here in Washington, D.C., and she passed away too early. But I'm glad we have the opportunity tonight to pay tribute to her wonderful career and her generosity and support of so many. And I thank you, Congressman Davis, for doing this. When you think about Vicki Dixon and her career, you can't help but think about Illinois. She was a native of Shelbyville, Illinois. Vicki felt a call to service at a very young age. From 1979 to 1989, Vicki worked for then Illinois Congressman Dan Crane, then went on to work for Mr. Dewinski at the Department of Veterans Affairs before serving at the Interior Department until she retired in 2016 and served for many, many different secretaries at the Department of Interior. And Vicki was a proud Illinois Republican, and she always supported the party back there and many of our candidates and elected officials. And she was integral in the development of something called the Lincoln Series. And the Lincoln Series really was a leadership program for young Republican women in Illinois, dedicated to increasing the numbers of young Republican women serving in government and in political positions. And that Lincoln Series would not have happened without Vicki Dixon. And there's many people that graduated from the Lincoln Series. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to so many people that Vicki helped touch by that program. Just one of many things that she did that was impactful on so many different folks. Vicki was known to many of us here in the halls of Congress for her work, specifically at the Department of Interior and at the Capitol Hill Club. Many of us got to know her. She was very involved with the Capitol Hill Club and many of our activities over there. She was always kind and generous, had a smile on her face, and was willing to help. She will be sorely missed by everyone who knew her here in D.C. and, of course, back home in Illinois. My prayers remain with Vicki's family, and may she rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Well, thank you for those great words, Congressman LaHood. I didn't know she was one of the folks who started the Lincoln Series. That's great. That's a great program, and it makes me see the influence of Vicki Dixon even more. A lot of great people have gone through that program, and now I know why it's a great program, because of people like her. Thank you. And another good friend of Vicki Dixon. Oh, well, there's Vicki talking. Just knocked it down. She's like, shush, quit saying so many nice things about us. You know, another good friend of Vicki is our colleague from the state of Washington. You and your wife were very close to Vicki, and I know after her passing, we exchanged phone calls to try and find out what happened. Dan Newhouse, and what's your wife's name again?
You always have trouble with that.
I do, yeah. Tell Joan I said hi.
I will do that.
And it's now in the congressional record that I acted like I didn't know her name. Hey, in all seriousness, Dan, why don't you tell the American people about our friend Vicki?
Well, thank you, Mr. Davis. And let me just say thank you very much for organizing this moment that we honor Vicki here on the House floor. It truly is something that she deserves, because she truly, you know, this institution of Congress, she held in high regard, as you know. So it's an honor for me to be able to stand here and honor her life. I call her a friend. Victoria Lynn Vicki Sands Dixon. Well, I only had the pleasure of knowing her, I think, for about the last 5 years, but I got to tell you, it soon became clear after meeting Vicki that she's one of those people that you could really call an angel on earth. She treated her friends just like family, and honestly, she would do anything for her friends. As you mentioned, she was a really close friend of my wife, Joan. And she's going to kill me for saying this, but for over 42 years. In fact, Vicki was even the maid of honor at our wedding. That's how close she was to us. She was considerate, she was thoughtful, gracious and funny, generous to a fault, and always the first to lend a helping hand. I can't tell you how many times Vicki, not even being asked, came to the rescue. One time, Joan and I had just moved into a new house in the middle of winter, and the gas hadn't been turned on yet. We couldn't get the gas company to respond. Vicki, before the end of the night, when the house temperature got down into the 40s, we had no less than 6 little heaters trying to keep that house warm. That's the kind of person she was. She was always there to help. I know you've heard from some of our friends tonight, and there's so many people that would agree with them that she truly was a friend. But she was more than that, too. She was a dedicated American. She was faithful to her country. Certainly proud of her party, proud of her home state of Illinois, and as you heard, a devoted public servant. It truly is a loss as we lose Vicki, but if there's anyone that I can think of, anyone worthy of moving on to a better place, it's her. Vicki was an example of the engaged and selfless citizen that we really all should try to emulate. I know her family and her community continue to be blessed by her memory. May she rest in peace with her beloved Bob Michael. Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Feel free to stick around if any other thoughts on Vicki's life come to mind. Make sure we let the world know. I do want to share a note I got from people who are very close to Vicki, and this epitomizes the influence Vicki had on so many here, and I think this note speaks for so many people. It says, I'm still devastated, just like everyone who knew her. Wow. You can look around this city, you can look around this Capitol, and you can see what Vicki Dixon meant. It didn't matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat. She worked for both administrations. This is the person who was able to help navigate people in the right direction to get things done. She's the perfect example of a career public servant who did not work for the public attention, but for the sake of our country. She loved the United States of America. Through her kindness and professionalism, she won the hearts of many, from the highest positions here in Washington to the humblest positions here in Washington. And I hope when we all leave that we can say the same thing. That our best friends just weren't those who walked into the best offices in this complex, but that our best friends were those who made sure the lights worked in these offices. That our friends were those who make Washington work for all of us, just like Vicki Dixon did. One of my favorite memories of Vicki is actually getting to meet her. It was with my great friend, my former boss, former chief of staff, Craig Roberts, who introduced me to her. And then I got reintroduced by my former colleague, my mentor, and my friend, and former boss, John Shimkus, Congressman Shimkus. You know, and that brings up a great memory that I have of Vicki and Leader Michael sitting right behind home plate. And I could tell if the game was going well because Vicki was very much smiles when I would chase a passed ball back to the backstop. If the game wasn't going well, she probably wouldn't look at me while I was going back, making another error, maybe, possibly, and yes, historically. But I can remember Vicki sitting there with Leader Michael in a Cubs jersey. Look, I'm from Illinois. I am not a Cubs fan. And neither was John Shimkus. He was a much more rabid fan of the Cardinals than many. Vicki Dixon was the only one that could wear a Cubs jersey around Congressman John Shimkus because she was Vicki Dixon. From 1989 until her retirement in 2016, Vicki served Secretaries of the Interior, as I mentioned earlier, under both Republicans and Democrats. That's where I got a chance to see what she meant to people. The constituents I used to work for, when I worked for Congressman John Shimkus, got VIP tours of the monuments because Vicki Dixon realized that when constituents come to Washington, they want to see their nation's capital. And she did everything she could to make that happen. So much so, when I became a member of Congress, she continued to help us allow our constituents to see the monuments under her direction at the Department of Interior. I remember a good friend of hers used to work with her at the Department of Interior under President Bush. And I've exchanged texts with Lori Yates, my good friend, over the last few weeks upon Vicki's passing. Lori, Vicki knew you were a great friend too. She knew that friendship mattered. and understand Vicki's in a better place. She's with her friends and those she loved the most, in a place where there's no pain. But in a place like Washington, D.C., she will be missed. You know, she worked for the Office of the Secretary of the Bureau of Land Management as an expert in external affairs. And before Interior, she worked for Congressman Dan Crane, and she also worked for the Veterans Affairs Secretary, Ed Derwinski. And as my colleagues mentioned, she's a native of Shelbyville, Illinois. Vicki attended Lakeland College in Mattoon. But I can remember one day, my wife and I were driving around our hometown of Taylorville, and we just so happened to drive by Vicki's mom's house because Vicki's mom, Peggy, lived in my hometown for some time. And who do I see standing out in the driveway of her mom's house in Taylorville, Illinois, but Vicki Dixon? So, of course, she flagged us down and we stopped. And I got to know her mom even after that meeting. And I know her mother, Peggy's devastated by her loss. Vicki moved from D.C. to Naples, where she, again, quickly made new friends. But on January 8th, it's one of those days where you exchange phone calls with colleagues and friends, and you hate to have that discussion. But just so everybody knows, Vicki passed peacefully in her sleep. Unexpected, in Naples. I can't tell you how devastated we all are to know that Vicki's not going to be able to enjoy that house, that time that she wanted to enjoy in Naples. But Vicki lived one of the fullest lives I think we could ever wish for. Vicki's mom, Peggy, and her family are devastated, and we know that. And I hope you know that our prayers are with them all. And I would urge anyone watching tonight to say a quick prayer for Vicki's mom and Vicki's family. But Vicki's resting in peace. Vicki's again in a place experiencing no pain. And I believe there's a God that allows her to be able to experience that peace with those she loved the most. Vicki, we know you're resting in peace, but D.C. is not resting with you right now. D.C. is honoring you tonight. And there's not a person that I think deserves it more than Victoria Sands Dixon to be honored by an institution that she loves so much. God bless Vicki and her memory and those who knew her, and let's all use her as an example. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Pursuant to Section 11B of House Resolution 188, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning.